recognize no matter how much you think you know your market, you have made a lot of assumptions about the market. Instead of being in love with the problem, I was in love with my product. And if you're in love with your product, that is code for I'm going to fail. You shouldn't be in love with the product. You should just be in love with the problem, because who cares about the product? It's the problem you're solving that should matter. AI is amazing. We're able to do things today that 2, 3 years ago were just impossible to do, or so difficult to do that it wasn't worth the investment. And now it's almost like effortless to do the same sorts of things. Anybody that says this is just a fad hasn't really used AI for any problem solving yet, because they would know that's not true.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, I'm excited to have David Hirschfeld on our show. David is a software development veteran with over 35 years of experience working with major tech companies before building, scaling, and selling his own startup. Now he helps startups and scale-ups grow smarter with AI-driven workflow transformation and his launch first method. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about startups, smart scaling, leadership. Thanks for being here, David. Let's get started.
Okay, great. Thanks. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So let's jump into 35 years, you've seen a lot. You've probably seen more things than most. Like with the significant, like the industry is evolving dramatically with AI and all this other stuff that's been happening. What are the biggest shifts you've witnessed so far?
Well, there's no question that AI is the biggest shift I've seen in terms of the speed and acceleration. It's like that CEO of Microsoft said, it's like the invention of fire, equivalent to in terms of the impact on the world and how quickly that impact is happening. With the launch first method, you asked me earlier before we started this, you were asking me where that came from. I've been involved with startups for a long time, and with my own, both successful exits and failed startups. So I learned a lot about what makes them successful and what makes them fail. And my first one was successful and I exited. My second one, I failed. And I didn't follow the same playbook because I didn't realize what that playbook was that made me successful the first time. And I honestly didn't recognize what those patterns were until after I started my current software company, Techies, where we do custom software development. And I've worked with over 90 startups over the last 18 years.
Wow.
And a few of them really successful, but the vast majority failed. And I finally, a few years ago, recognized the consistent thing that caused those companies that were successful to make it and the ones that failed and to fail. And that was waiting way too long to validate product market fit through sales. Because the only way you can prove you've got product market fit is that enough people are buying your product in enough numbers that what it costs to acquire a customer is 1/3 of what the lifetime value of that customer is. And until you can establish that, you don't have any proof you have product market fit and that you have a viable business. And the problem is most founders believe in what their product is all about, and they believe in that market, that they're all going to come and buy it once they make it available because the need is there and the value is there and it's solving a big enough problem. But they don't validate that. They don't take the black robe off, the belief, and put on the white coat and turn it into a lab experiment with hypothesis and proof and metrics. And so
You said something very important. You said need, right?
Yeah,
extremely important, because I think a lot of startups confuse what I would consider want versus needs. It's one thing to have a want, right? I want to go on vacation. I want to have a big, beautiful office. I need a home to live in. So I feel like that's missed. Tell me a little bit about that. How do startups, I have a feeling that this has to do with some of the reasons why they might fail. What are some of why do people get blinded by this want versus need?
Because they mix up want with what they believe is what drives people to buy things, and it's not want, it's need. Even vacations. Let's talk about vacations, because that's the most obscure thing to talk about when you want to talk about need and why it matters. But people don't buy vacations because they want to go on a vacation. They buy it because they are afraid they're going to miss out or they're not going to create enough memories in with their family, or that they're going to burn out at work if they don't have balance, or what there's a fear that drives them to then go on vacations, or spend time with their loved one. Fear drives all buying decisions. If you didn't have any feeling of survival around something, you wouldn't spend any money buying it because you're perfectly satisfied. Nothing has to change. So
Hmm.
it's only when oxygen gets thin that you feel like you need to take a deeper breath, or that the muscles are fatigued that you need to slow down on, right? There's always an hour that you start to feel like you don't have enough food in your stomach. You're getting hungry. So that restaurant that has you really want to go there because that looks so good. But if you're full and you're looking at restaurants, all of a sudden restaurants don't look all that interesting to you. So you don't make reservations for that next. Everything is driven by need. I used to think it was the other way around. I didn't like that whole idea that you had to find the fear factor in terms of survival to sell something, but actually that's human nature. There's no motivation to change anything if you're not afraid from a survival perspective at a very base level that something's not right with the world, and to make it right you need to do something different. And if you don't make it right, then your whole life is going to go off track, or
Interesting.
something, you're going to fail, or so.
Understood. Okay. David, how did your time at Intel, Motorola, and other large tech companies you worked at approach, how did that shape your approach to innovation?
Well, it made me recognize the need for execution in the innovation process. So these are companies, I was involved, I was running projects as a consultant for these larger companies when I was at Texas Instruments and Computer Associates, and an independent consultant after that. In that role, we're focused on delivery and execution for things that somebody else innovated. So I wasn't involved in innovation with those companies. It was about delivery of
Hmm.
a software project of some kind. But I was always interested in innovating, which is why I started my own software company in the early 90s in logistics, route distribution, and inventory management. And I did that with the idea that, okay, I want to start a software company. I had a partner. We thought we can pick this industry, create kind of an annuity by building a Windows product, putting it on the market, and that would generate some kind of income. We kind of learn how to run a small little software company. And despite every effort on both my partner's part and mine, we ended up growing it to 800 customers in 22 countries,
Wow.
and sold it in 2000. And when we did that, I followed launch for I we proved product market fit by building a very simple MVP in a couple months, and then put it out on the market to see if we could sell it, and started selling and recognized that there's a market. And then people started to tell us what they really needed for this product to have the kind of value that would help their business, and that's product solution fit. And so we started adding those features to give them the full value of what they needed. But product market fit was there because people needed a Windows-based product to manage their business in this particular market.
Wow.
So I didn't realize how lucky we were that we approached it in such a simple way initially. So we had a product, an MVP-ish Windows product in 2 months, and we put ads out in the trade magazines for this industry. And within 6 weeks, and so every 2 weeks there would be an ad that would show, and in 6 weeks we started selling our first, because people have to see ads a few times. We started selling our first copies back when that was the way you market it. And then
David,
within a few months, we were selling a bunch. Yeah.
you said something great. You said,
Our,
you have to listen to what the customers want so that they would buy the product. That's
yeah.
another, I think, miss with a lot of startups. This just reminds me, I'm an advisor to a startup that the product that they had that I was helping them with. I said, I don't think this is the right time for this product, because in tech recruiting there was a recession, and so they were trying to sell an ATS, applicant tracking system product, and I said, no one cares about that right now,
Good.
right? Everybody needs new business. You need to go and create something that allows you to, sure, take advantage of the 100,000 people I have in my database from a candidate perspective, but we need business. So they went and talked to enough people that they decided that's the want, the need, and the fear, apparently. And so
Right.
that's what they pivoted to. And I think this new startup is doing much better. So you said it, you nailed it. You got to listen to what people are saying. Some people are stubborn and they've been taught to not listen to anybody. Who cares what people say? I believe in my product. That's awesome. You should. But your potential customer is saying, I don't need that. I need this. So it sounds like that was a big winning formula for you. Um,
Yeah.
David, you mentioned a second startup that failed. What was the key? What were the top three reasons? What was the three differences between the winning startup and the failing startup?
Well, there's two things. One is I approached it from the belief perspective, not from the proof perspective. So I built a product, and this was in the automobile industry, a wholesale dealer trading network for being able to source cars that have been traded in from various dealers when somebody's looking for a car from another dealership that matches whatever that trade-in was, right? When it hasn't hit the market yet. And there was a big need for this, but I was all focused on making a really cool product because I figured that would attract people, and it did. But then I didn't want to start to charge for the product. I wanted to build a network of people using it so there'd be a critical mass that would draw more people in and then raise money. This was the biggest mistake I ever made. I did get an offer. I was trying to raise 1.2 million, and I did get an offer for that, but they wanted like 40% of the company, and
Wow.
I got that offer fairly quickly. I should have taken the offer. I shouldn't have actually needed the offer. I should have just started charging for my product and build a revenue model because people would have paid for it. But I was afraid of asking. This is the big thing. Founders are afraid to ask people to buy the product because what if they say no? What does that mean? And I fell into that trap, and I didn't get another offer. And of course, the first offer, when I went back to them, they weren't interested anymore. So I ran this as long as I could, and then I finally closed that business and started Techies.
Wow, interesting. So in summary, what were the three kind of key reasons, David?
Number one, I should have just focused on selling the service, not worrying about raising money. As raising money would have made sense at some point, but I would have been in the driver's seat and I would have had a lot of options instead of not having options and not having any control. The second thing was my focus should have been on selling, not just building out the functionality, but just focused on selling and building the market. And spending my time with wholesalers and customers so that I understood their problem in a much more granular way so that they would also spread this to everybody that they know, and it would have grown a lot faster, which would have solved my critical mass problem. I fell in all the same traps that most founders fall into, and that was instead of being in love with the problem, I was in love with my product. And if you're in love with your product, that is code for I'm going to fail. You shouldn't be in love with the product. You should just be in love with the problem because who cares about the product? It's the problem you're solving that should matter, right? And if you spend all your time thinking about the problem and spending your time talking to your customers, you're going to consistently find a path to success because all you're doing is mitigating the problem with a product that may be a great product or not, but who cares as long as it's mitigating the problem, right? It's the wrong thing to focus on, loving the product.
That's great.
That's great.
That's really
Right.
good
So
stuff.
against them.
Let's talk a little bit about your AI-driven workflow transformation beyond the hype, right? So AI is a buzzword today. Everybody's talking about AI. How do you differentiate real AI transformation from marketing hype?
It goes back to loving the problem. What's the problem you're solving? So I look at it this way from a founder perspective, and it's not any different from an AI hype versus reality perspective, right? AI is amazing. We're able to do things today that 2, 3 years ago were just impossible to do or so difficult to do that it wasn't worth the investment. And now it's almost like effortless to do the same sorts of things. So there's anybody that said this is just a fad hasn't really used AI for any problem solving yet because they would know that's not true. As far as like workflow automation, when is it of real value? Okay, so that depends on how well you know the problem you're trying to solve. So, and who you're trying to solve it for. If you're trying to solve it for yourself, then the question is, what's the cost of this problem, like financial cost, that this problem is causing me before I even know what the solution is. I know that this is what my problem is, or these are the two or three things that are related to it. Each one has a cost to it. If I didn't have that problem, this is how much I'd save. And each one has a perception impact because one may have a cost, but by fixing it, all I'm doing is addressing the cost. It's not really helping me in any other way, or I'm not going to get buy-in from management to fix that because everybody in our industry is dealing with that problem, even if it's costly, and they don't feel like that matters because right now their initiative is growth, and this will help you. Right? So that perceived impact is the other half of that equation. How important is it that this problem goes away? How much survival do I feel, or how much risk do I feel because of this problem? Again, it's back to that fear, that survival thing, right? So if both are high, then I need to solve that problem, right? That's at the top of my priority list to solve it. And if it's a manual process and workflow automation solves that, now it has huge value. Um, and that's kind of how we look at any workflow automation problem. It's like you look at everything in the business as a potential bottleneck, and the business's growth is always restricted at one point in their business that's preventing the rest of the business from going faster. Yep. So focus on that. You open up that channel, and now everything's flowing there, which then makes it possible to find the next bottle point, which might be upstream, downstream. Yeah.
Makes sense. How do businesses leverage AI in a practical, non-disruptive way? And by disruptive, I mean like disrupting your own business in the bad way, right? Getting in the way. What's a practical
Right.
way that business can inject AI into their workflows?
And that depends on the business, right? Okay, so let's pick a hospital system that has people exiting the hospital and then transitioning to long-term care, which requires intervention with a nurse communicating with the patient and the family to make this transition. Nurses are expensive, they're in high demand, and there's nowhere near enough of them. And so there's a huge problem right now with hospitals being able to handle the volume in any kind of competent way, and give their patients the resources they need so they feel safe and taken care of in this process. AI steps in here really well. So one of my clients built a voice nurse that's trained on medical and pharma information, trained on this transition process, and also has that patient's records as part of their training. And so they make these phone calls to the patient, and they'll continue to make the phone calls or to family members until they get a hold of somebody. And then it's a very friendly conversation, and it's a very natural kind of conversation back and forth, not like a select one for option A, two for option B type thing, but hi, I'm Claire, your AI nurse. We're transitioning you from the hospital now to long-term care while you continue to recover. There's some things I think you should know about. Is this a good time to talk? And they say, yeah, it is, or no, it isn't. So, okay, when would you like me to call you back? Or would you I don't know when, okay, I'll just try you again tomorrow about the same time. Is that okay? Or this is a good time now. And then they start talking and they go, I don't know if and it sounds so natural, and the reaction and response is so natural that the patient will start saying things like, I don't know if I'm really confident about this, and scary. And they say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But that's very natural. Most people are very nervous and scared during this process. There's some things I think I can do that might help. Would you like to hear some of like that? That's huge. And that frees up a huge restriction in terms of that channel. It takes a huge dependency off the nurses, but the nurses are there if AI determines that they need to get an actual person involved because there is some exception, or you need to schedule something, or maybe it's a clinical issue that has to be scheduled. AI can do the scheduling, but maybe there's some decision process that you don't want to leave to AI. So it just automatically then says, let me get somebody on the phone. And now these nurses are much higher level experts that are focused on just the edge cases.
Sure. So basically, the human in the loop is still there. It's just it's maybe at the 20% mark. right? It's a lot is
Right.
happening without the human in the loop to get
Actually,
there.
more like at the 2% mark, right?
Wow, 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 wow. Okay,
Yeah.
because they
You
can
don't want
solve
to, yeah,
most problems.
yeah, right. It solved 99% of the problem or
Wow.
98% of the problem. That's the goal, right? And
Now, the
then,
willingness has to be there from
Sure.
the
like,
patients to have these conversations with an AI. That's,
right.
I think, a big problem I think we still have. That people are still not quite ready to have these conversations. Would you agree?
I think it depends on how natural that person is on the other end of the phone.
Mm.
And also the AI can, part of that can, if the patient says, I'm not comfortable talking with an AI and said, okay, that's not an uncommon response, and I don't want you to feel that you can't talk with a person. So why don't I get a nurse on the phone for you, right? And but the AI, you can have 100 of them all calling at the same time when there's only 6 nurses on staff.
David, what's like a common, I guess, mistake companies make when they're trying to integrate AI into their workflows?
Well, I think they just try to do too much too fast, and they're not taking cultural impact. Like they're just with
Yes.
some companies just assume people are going to accept this in their companies, and they and it's surprising how many people are not comfortable with AI and haven't spent any time using it and don't realize what it can do and the value. So that's number one, is that there's a good understanding of where there can be cultural acceptance in your company. And those are areas where you might want to focus first, and work on the areas where you don't believe there is cultural acceptance, and start to kind of do some education and training and DEI, AI wise,
Yeah.
right? To make it acceptable, to make people feel safe about what AI is going to do to help them with their job as opposed to replace their job. That's probably the biggest thing. The second thing is not having a game plan, a really implementation game plan that prioritizes and steps AI into various roles in the company, which can be easily done, but it requires understanding where the priorities are and where you can have the most success, and doing some assessment in that. And the third thing is they just don't recognize that AI is going to make any difference, or workflow automation is that important. And there are a lot of companies that are backward in that way. They may be the leaders in their industry, but they're very backwards in terms of their own workflow automation in their company. And, they feel like, well, we're dominant because we have a reputation and a brand and everybody knows how good we are at all these things. And, but everything is still very manual.
You talked a little bit about fear. Even with AI, I think there's a fear of missing out, right? How much of that drives why companies are injecting AI into their workflows, and sometimes too quickly, sometimes ineffectively, because they don't want to be behind. At the same time, they just don't have a good strategy. Like, what's your thoughts on that? Is there some truth to that as well?
Oh yeah, I think so.
This
I
is a little
think that's
FOMO,
probably
yeah?
true. I think that's true with everybody, right? Including me. I mean, including my company, in terms of that fear of missing out on stuff. We try to be on the very leading edge of all this stuff, to the degree that we're in this process of creating all the procedures and protocols to build our applications using AI. And we're at probably 30% right now. You look at the application whole, the UI, the architecture, the database, the backend, the microservices, the deployment. We're at about 30%. We have a plan to get to 80%. We think we can do that in the next 4 to 6 weeks, but there's problems in this process, real significant problems. So part of it is you think, oh, AI can do all this stuff, but then you hit some real walls where AI just isn't quite there yet. For example, context. AI has a lot of trouble when you get to complex things like a big application. Once it gets to a certain size and it's not that big, it has a lot of trouble understanding when it needs to make a change in one area. That change ripples down into other areas, and then it starts breaking things, right? Or it forgets how it's supposed to work in certain areas, and it changes that. So we have potential solutions for these things, but this is an internal R&D project to implement these things. So there's certain limitations that you have to understand what AI is capable of right now and not, and recognize that it's evolving at light speed. So faster than anything else I've ever seen.
Same here. Same here. Let's say they're a tech driven company, but they're not a tech company. Should they be trying to build these things, or should they be buying or bringing in expertise from the AI perspective?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's a question at the heart of any time you build versus buy. So the question is how much of a critical success factor is the thing you're talking about building or buying in terms of delivery in your business? Is there something that's competent that can deliver that for you and give you enough value based on the cost? Because then you can get there quicker if it's already there. And is it part of your intellectual property in terms of your actual core competencies are? Because the closer they are to your core competencies, then the more likely you should be to want to build it. The
Okay.
farther they are from that, like a CRM. If let's say you're almost any company that has sales and communication with customers, right? Is CRM a core competency of your business? Probably not. It's probably
It's a
but
tool.
neither is bookkeeping, right?
Yeah.
Having bookkeeping software. These are tools. Even though they're critical to your success, they're not part of what makes you you as a company, right? For me, it's our software development team. It's not project management. It's not, to a certain degree, it's not the code stacks that we use, right? It's our skill set around that stuff and our ability to build unique, distinct things that automate our internal processes. And I can talk about those things in detail because we're building a lot of things to automate the processes internally. And those are core competencies that will probably turn into SaaS products because everybody needs the things we're building. If the same way that other companies build products that they need internally that they start to market to their industries.
You talk a lot about this launch first method. What exactly does it mean, and how are you implementing that with all the 70 plus startups you've worked with?
Okay. So, and thanks for that. And this is a passion of mine, primarily because I've watched so many startups fail. And I feel there's a much better way to launch a SaaS B2B startup in particular is kind of that would be our tight channel. The idea is that most of these startups, they fail because they've been sold this idea that they have to create an MVP and build a pitch deck and go out and raise money as the way of launching. And they raise money from VCs or angel investors. And yes, and that is a way to do it, but there's a better way of doing it. And the problem with doing that is all the work you do to raise money, create your pitch deck, go out and market yourself to the VCs, none of that moves your business forward at all. Unless you get lucky and a VC funds you and they've got a network of other companies that they've funded that can help accelerate your growth. But that's not very so. And I corroborated these numbers. A typical VC might see 3,000 pitch decks for every 30 investments they make. And out of those 30 investments, three will be successful at an accelerated rate. Another 3 to 4 or 5 of those will become profitable, but not significantly, and the rest fail. So this is VC funded.
Give me the
Start.
numbers one more time, David.
Yeah, out of roughly 70% of VC funded startups fail.
Okay. Wow.
Um, 30% of them are successful to some degree, and only maybe 5 to 10% of them really get big, growth curves.
And those are impressive numbers. Those are actually surprisingly, because I'm an investor as well. And one of the things I hear often is 90% of startups fail or don't do anything worthy of a mention, right? They might not completely close their doors, but they might end up being a lifestyle business for the two owners or something as a side project, right? And that's not enough
Right.
to give the VC its 10x or 100x that they're looking for, or frankly, angel investors either.
Yeah. And I'm going to refine those numbers and I've corroborated this with many other software shops that develop software in B2B and B2C space and things like that. It's more like 98% of software startups fail. Uh, right. And some of them just never even ever generate any revenue. And you never hear about those. They never make the statistics, but it's a large number. Startups fail at huge numbers. And I know I've seen this myself. I wouldn't say that's how many, the percentage of startups that have failed with techies, but it's not far from that. And I've had a few really successful ones. And the really successful ones are, they follow certain patterns. Like I said, one is they go out to their customers, they spend their time on the problem, they go out to the customers early, they get financial commitments from those customers in terms of checks early to prove that this is a product that where there's a market, and enough of those customers they get it from so that they know it's not a fluke. They've got one or two friends that believe in them, but this is a product that's really needed in the market. So with launch first, what we do is we say you need something to demo to people if you're going to ask them to buy something, but you need to ask them to buy something as soon as possible. It doesn't have to be a working product. It doesn't even have to be a real product, but it has to be something that looks like a real product, and it has to have enough of your vision implemented so somebody can see the value that they're going to get in this product over time. So what we do is we create a really sophisticated set of mock-ups that are animated that look like a real product and behave like your real product. They're just not a real product. They're not an MVP. They're much broader than an MVP. They show a lot more of the functionality of your product than an MVP does. They can, but they're not real. But when you demo it, the person you're showing it to could not tell that you're not demoing a real product. You never lie to a prospect. You always tell them this is a high fidelity prototype and the actual product won't be available for 3 to 6 months if it's a pure pre-launch sale. And there are different ways of doing these launches, which is why I say that. But they won't hear that if it's realistic enough, the product that you're showing. What they'll think is they must have developed it and they're testing it and they're not releasing all the features right away. That's what they think. And then you go out and you would say, look, let's do some high value, let's say out to you. We'll give you a lifetime license. Pay me 18 months of the subscription fee advance and you will get this lifetime license and you'll be part of the pre-launch club where you get free implementation, a phone number where you can call anytime for support and help and things like that. And people go, and when I tell people this, they go, lifetime license, I'm giving away my market. And I say, okay, fine. Let's say you sold 200 copies at $2,500 each, license them, right? So you just raised $500,000 from customers. These are invested customers who'll be the best beta customers you could possibly have because they need the product, they want the product. And if you look at how much of your market you gave away, it's probably an immeasurable fraction of a percent that you've given away. Now go out to a seed investor and try to raise that same $500,000. How much of your company you have to give away for that?
Exactly.
And then they go, oh, yeah. And plus, you've got a revenue engine. So if you do want to raise money, you've shown traction, you've shown product market fit, you've got a killer prototype to demo. And now raising money is a whole different discussion.
So David, it's kind of reversed in a way where instead of me spending 3 years building this brilliant platform that I am in love with, as you said earlier,
Right.
and now I have to go and convince people that it's a great product, and they're like, I don't need that. Oh, no thanks. Instead, what you're saying is you're going out there, you're giving people an idea of what you're building, you're asking them what they would want to become customers. You're
Right.
getting a commitment that they will buy when the product is ready or right now.
They buy now. They have to buy in now because you're giving them a killer deal. You're doing that in exchange for them buying in early. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One is the classic pre-launch sale where first version will be an MVP, won't have all these features, but it'll be out in three or 4 months, right? So they only have to wait a few months. And then you have to make some guarantees about if it doesn't come out, that you'll refund their money, that sort of thing. But that's safe to do as long as you've scoped the MVP tightly enough. People understand as long as they see a roadmap and features coming out that'll be, all they need this because their problem you're solving for them, if you've been focused on the problem, is really costly and their perception of the impact is really high. So you found that early adopter, they need the product, they'll pay for it, and they'll be your best support system in terms of helping get to product solution fit where, you get in the features that really capture the value that they need.
David, one of my favorite AI products that I use currently is an AI assistant, and this gentleman did just that. Basically, he has a product that's it's actually ready. It's in kind of beta mode, right? I get it for 1/10 the cost, $99 a month or something like that. It's brilliant, and he keeps refining and improving the product. But I mean, he got this thing off the ground, and he was generating revenue from very quickly.
Right.
Very impressive, and the product keeps getting better and better. And every couple weeks we meet, and he adds features and he corrects things that are missing. I really like the approach, and I was happy to give him $100 a month for an AI assistant that would listen to all my meetings, show up, give me notes. And now it's getting smarter and smarter. Now it's attending meetings I don't go to and giving me insights from other meetings, and it's starting to understand, hey, this meeting there's been mentions of this issue across multiple meetings. Here's a potential solution. So now it's giving me solutions in my own business.
Oh, I'm really curious what the product is because we've talked. I've thought about building that product many times. We just have too many other internal initiatives that we're working on.
Great
So I'd like
product.
to,
It's called Powerline. I can introduce you to the gentleman. Really
yeah,
smart young
please do.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, really good product.
that's exactly a great way to launch if you're doing it MVP style, where you just build the very simple core and you find people that'll buy it, right? That'll buy in early because those people become your roadmap in terms of how you need to build the product out to really capture value. And you don't always want to do what everybody asks you to do in your product, right? They'll ask, this is important for me. Fine. Is that what the market really needs? Is that solving a problem that problem is being people? A lot of people are struggling with that problem. If it is, then it's a high priority on your roadmap. If it's just something that would be a coolness factor, then it's probably a low priority.
How do you measure a lot of people? Is it 10 people? Is it 30 people? How do you kind of validate what a lot of people need so that, you're not sitting there in analysis paralysis for the rest of your life, but you're talking to enough people where no, this is legit.
You try to quantify from them, first of all, what is the cost and how much does this impact you personally? This problem, how much would it fix that if I created this feature? Then you start asking that from other people. And you very quickly get a sense if you just capture how many people are supporting this idea or not supporting it to the degree that you need, whether or not it's dominant in your market. And if your market is niched properly so that in this niche it's dominant, this niche not so much, and which is your early adopter niche, then you're going to try to focus and capture that early adopter niche as much as possible. Another one mistake that a lot of founders make is they think that their product applies to lots of niches. And maybe it does, but you can only sell to one niche at a time.
Interesting.
Because the tighter you can identify that early adopter niche and the smaller and tighter you can identify, the higher your closing ratio of sales and the more you can charge. So it's an very direct inverse relationship to those things. And most founders don't nail it like that.
That's really good. David, in 2 sentences, give founders some advice on workflow and this launch first concept.
Okay, so 2 sentences. Number one, recognize no matter how much you think you know your market, you have made a lot of assumptions about the market. Even if you come from that market and you're struggling with a problem yourself, which this is a good foundation for founders, and you know what the cost of that problem is and and the personal impact it has on you, and you have reached to that market, so you know a bunch of other people in your position in the same business struggling with the same thing, and you have some reach to them, even then you still have made a lot of assumptions about the viability of this business and this product. Recognize that, put the white coat on, turn it into a lab experiment, turn everything into that lean startup methodology. I'm a big believer in that. And measure value, the cost, the impact, and the prevalence is in the market. The second thing I'm going to say is get this book. It's the best business book I've ever read, called The Mom Test.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've read a lot of business books. This one in particular is good because, I've been saying for a long time, you got to focus on the problem, but I didn't have the framework for it the way that this guy does. Now, I can't think of his name, the author, but he's had several exits. And the reason it's called Mom Test is if you say, I've got a great business idea to your mother, and this is assuming you have a good relationship with your mother, right? And you say, I've got this really great business idea. What do you think? And your mom's, what's she going to say? She's going to say, oh, honey, I have so much trust in you. I know you're going to make it successful. That sounds like a great idea, right? No matter what it is. And so people that you're talking to in the market do the same thing when you start to ask them about features and products and things. So how do you talk to all those people about your product idea and get really truthful, honest answers that are valuable to you and to your product? And the way you do that is you never talk about your product or your features. You talk about their problems. It goes back to loving the problem and loving the customer, right? What problem do you have? This problem is, how big is this problem? What other problems do you have? How have you dealt with them in the past? What worked? What didn't work? You never talk about your product, your feature, because there's no value to that. Because as soon as you start to talk about that, there's a shift that goes on in their minds, and they don't want to offend you, or they feel like they're being taken advantage of, or whatever that shift is. You're not going to get honesty from them.
I like it.
Unless they ask you about that thing. And even then, you still ask, why are you asking about that? What problem does it solve? Just go back to the problem.
Amazing. David, where can people find you?
They can find me at techies.com, spelled TEKYZ.
You don't even have to. It's right in the background.
Right. But somebody listened to the podcast, they might not get it, right? So, and then David, anybody that made it to the end of this podcast, I'll tell you what my email is. It's david@techies.com. That won't be a link in the podcast because obviously I don't want a billion spam email, but David@techies, you can reach me. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And I'm coming out with my own podcast called Scaling Smarter. Not out yet, but it'll be out soon.
Amazing. David, you've been great. We've learned a lot about your process, your mindset, your company. So thank you for the time, and let's stay connected.
Awesome. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, David. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avita Santoplian, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.